Weddings are supposed to be happy days, but my sister's wedding felt like a stage built just to embarrass me. The hall was packed with more than 120 guests, relatives, friends, neighbors, laughing, talking, enjoying the music while cameras flashed everywhere. I tried to stay in the background, like I always did in my family. Then, suddenly my sister grabbed the microphone and smiled at the crowd. "Before dinner," she said, "I want to say something about my brother." The spotlight turned toward me, and my stomach dropped. She laughed and said, "You know how every family has that one person who never really achieves anything?" A few guests chuckled. Then she pointed directly at me. "Well, in our family, that's him." The room burst into laughter. My face burned as I looked at my parents, hoping they would stop her, but they were laughing too, louder than anyone else. My sister raised her glass and said dramatically, "To my brother, the only guest here who contributed absolutely nothing to this wedding." People clapped, some even recorded it on their phones, and I stood there silently because what none of them knew was that this entire wedding existed because of me, and in just a few minutes, the groom was about to reveal the truth. The laughter kept echoing around the hall long after my sister finished her toast. Glasses clinked, people whispered to each other. And a few guests were still smiling, as if the whole moment had been the best joke of the night. I stood there quietly, feeling every pair of eyes on me. My sister looked proud of herself, enjoying the attention, while my parents sat at their table shaking their heads like my existence was some kind of embarrassment they had to tolerate. For a moment, I thought about leaving. It would have been the easiest thing to do, walk out the door, disappear into the night, and let them continue celebrating without me. But I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, calm and silent, because I knew something they didn't. The music slowly started again. Waiters moved between tables serving drinks, and the guests returned to their conversations. My sister leaned toward the groom, whispering something while still laughing. She looked completely confident, like she had just delivered the highlight of the evening. Then the groom suddenly stood up from his chair. At first, nobody noticed. He adjusted his suit jacket and looked around the room like he was thinking carefully about something. When he walked toward the microphone stand again, a few people assumed he was about to make a romantic speech. Weddings usually had those moments, sweet words, jokes, maybe a story about how the couple met. But his expression didn't look playful. It looked serious. He picked up the microphone and tapped it lightly. The sound echoed through the speakers, and the conversations in the hall slowly faded. My sister looked surprised. "What are you doing?" she whispered to him with a confused smile. He didn't answer her right away. Instead, he looked out at the crowd of guests, then back at my sister, and finally his eyes landed on me across the room. "I think," he said slowly into the microphone, "there's something important everyone here should know." The room grew quiet again, but this time the mood felt different. People leaned forward in their chairs, curious about what he was about to say. My sister forced a laugh. "Babe, save it for later," she said, trying to keep things light. But he shook his head gently. "No," he replied. "It should be said now." He paused for a moment, like he was choosing his words carefully. Then he turned slightly, so everyone could see both of us at the same time. "First," he said, "I want to apologize to someone here tonight." Guests started whispering again, wondering who he meant. My parents looked confused, glancing at each other. My sister frowned, clearly not enjoying the direction this moment was taking. The groom took a slow breath before continuing. "I want to apologize to her brother," he said, gesturing toward me. Suddenly, the entire room turned to look in my direction again, but this time the laughter was gone. My sister's smile froze on her face. "Why would you apologize to him?" she asked sharply. He didn't respond to her question right away. Instead, he stepped closer to the microphone and spoke louder, so every guest could hear him clearly. "Because the joke you just made isn't true," he said calmly. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Some guests shifted in their seats. My father leaned forward slightly, looking uncomfortable. My sister crossed her arms, already looking irritated. "It was just a joke," she said quickly. "Everyone knows that." But the groom shook his head again. "No," he replied quietly. "Everyone doesn't know that." He reached down to the table beside him and picked up a thin folder that had been sitting there among the wedding decorations. At first it looked like nothing important, just a stack of papers. But the way he held it made the room feel tense. "For the past 2 months," he continued, "we've been planning this wedding together. And like most weddings, things got expensive very quickly." A few guests chuckled nervously, recognizing the truth in that statement. He nodded slightly. "The venue alone cost more than we expected. The photographer wanted a deposit. The catering company needed payment before today." He paused again, glancing at my sister. "And there were moments when we honestly didn't know how we were going to afford everything." My sister's expression shifted from irritation to confusion. "Why are you telling them this?" she asked under her breath. But he ignored her again. Slowly, he opened the folder and pulled out a few sheets of paper. "During that time," he said, holding the papers up slightly, "someone kept stepping in to help us." Guests began murmuring to each other again. "Someone paid the deposit for the venue when we were short." Another murmur moved through the crowd. "Someone covered the photographer when we thought we might have to cancel him." My mother looked toward my father now, clearly trying to understand where this story was going. The groom glanced down at the papers again before finishing his sentence. "And someone even paid a large part of the catering bill, so all of you could enjoy dinner tonight." The whispers grew louder. My sister stared at him in disbelief. "Okay, and," she said impatiently, "what does that have to do with anything?" He slowly turned his head toward me again. "It has everything to do with something," he answered. Then he raised one of the papers so it was visible in his hand. "Because every single one of those payments came from the same person." The room fell completely silent. My parents looked at each other again, and I could see the uncertainty growing on their faces. My sister shook her head, slightly, like she was already rejecting whatever he was about to say. "Who?" someone from the back of the hall called out, curiously. The groom didn't rush his answer. He simply pointed across the room, straight at me. "Him," he said. The word seemed to freeze the entire wedding hall. My sister's eyes widened in shock. My father blinked, as if he hadn't heard correctly. My mother slowly covered her mouth with her hand. The groom placed the papers back on the table and stepped away from the microphone for a moment, letting the silence settle over the room. Then he looked back at my sister and said quietly but clearly enough for everyone to hear, "Your brother is the reason this wedding happened at all." The hall fell into a heavy silence after the groom's words. My sister stood there, shocked, unable to say anything, while my parents looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. The laughter from a few minutes ago had completely disappeared. I slowly picked up my jacket and walked toward the exit. My mother tried to stop me, her voice suddenly soft. "Wait, please." I paused for a moment, then looked back at them calmly. I didn't help for recognition. I said quietly, "I just didn't expect humiliation." Then I opened the door and stepped outside. Behind me, the celebration continued, but something in that room had changed forever.